Home morning, Elon Musk's young son whispered, "Daddy, I saw heaven." What followed wasn't just a dream, it was a message that shattered Elon's logic and led him somewhere no rocket ever could. But what did the boy see, and who was waiting for him there? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The house was too quiet for a Wednesday morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Elon Musk's Los Angeles home, catching in the air like flecks of dust suspended in slow motion. The silence wasn't cold, it was deliberate, like the house itself was holding its breath. In the center of the kitchen, sleek and softly humming with automation, Elon sat at a long, polished table. He wasn't eating. A tablet glowed in front of him, lined with launch schematics, propulsion calculations, and lunar blueprint updates. His fingers moved out of habit, flicking and tapping, but his mind was miles away, still orbiting around deadlines and emergencies. The espresso machine hissed in the background, pouring itself exactly the way he preferred. Lights adjusted their tone as the morning progressed. The blinds opened in measured degrees. The entire home was like a ship running on flawless code, and yet, in the center of it all, Elon barely noticed. He looked less like a man at home and more like a passenger between worlds. Then came the soft sound of bare feet padding across tile. He looked up. There was X in pale blue pajamas, his hair a soft mess and a stuffed owl tucked under his arm. The boy walked straight toward him, climbed into his father's lap without a word, and leaned in close. "Daddy," he whispered, "I saw heaven." Elon blinked. He hadn't been expecting a moment like this. Not today, not ever. The word hung in the air like an echo from another time. Heaven. A word that didn't belong in his vocabulary. And yet, as he looked into his son's face, something shifted. Elon Musk didn't believe in heaven until his son described it. X didn't speak like a child recounting a dream. His voice was calm, steady. He held his stuffed owl tightly as he described it. Floating, not with wings, but as if the sky had lifted him. There was music, but it didn't make sound. "I heard it in my bones," he said, "and there was a river, only it didn't flow down. It went up, into the stars." Elon watched him, frozen. He had seen his son dream before, of rockets, of planets, of machines, but this wasn't that. This wasn't fantasy. It felt more like memory, real, heavy, and precise. Then X said, "There was a man, not a regular man. He was glowing, not metal but light. His face looked like fire and sky. He didn't talk with his mouth. He talked here." X placed a small hand on his chest. "He asked me, 'What do you want to bring back?'" Elon's breath caught. Something tightened in his throat. This wasn't a dream, not in the usual sense. It had too much shape, too much quiet power. And as his son's eyes searched his face, waiting for a response, Elon realized something deep and disarming. He knew this wasn't imagination, it was a message. Elon Musk's life had always been built on logic. From the earliest days of coding and entrepreneurship, his belief system was rooted in precision. PayPal was built on trustless systems, not sentiment. SpaceX thrived on math, not miracles. Neuralink chased the inner workings of the brain, not the soul. For Elon, the universe wasn't a mystery to worship, it was a puzzle to solve. He had dismissed religion long ago, not out of malice, but necessity. Belief in his world got in the way. He needed facts, numbers, reliability. He had no room for wonder that couldn't be measured or tested. But now, this morning, his son had said something that no equation could contain. "I saw heaven." It echoed louder than any engine Elon had ever designed. As X finished his cereal, humming softly, Elon sat frozen, caught in memories he didn't expect to return. A flicker of an old letter came to mind, written by his mother on his 18th birthday, folded away in a box of relics he rarely opened. "Remember the child who used to stare at the stars," she wrote, "and wonder if someone was staring back. That child was closer to truth than the man you might become." He had built rockets. But when had he stopped wondering? The silence of the kitchen wrapped around him. His empire, spanning continents, orbiting planets, suddenly felt small in comparison to the question his son had posed. What do you want to bring back? It wasn't just a question for a dream, it was a question for a life. Had he been so focused on what to launch that he forgot what mattered once it returned? Elon built rockets, but had he lost his roots? Elon sat at the dining table with his tablet in hand, its screen filled with neural interface notes and orbital algorithms. But his eyes kept drifting to the drawing his son had placed beside his coffee. Crayon on folded printer paper. Lines that made no sense to Elon's rational mind. And yet, he couldn't look away. X sat across from him, legs swinging beneath the chair, a fresh sheet of paper in front of him. The drawing was slow, deliberate. A tree with golden roots growing upward, its branches fading into a sky made of swirling light. Above the tree floated figures. No faces, just outlines. Like beings drawn from memory. "Was it just a dream, buddy?" Elon finally asked, trying to sound casual. X didn't stop drawing. He shrugged. "No, I wasn't asleep there. Just here." Elon blinked. "What do you mean?" X looked up for the first time. "I think I went back, but not like how we go to Grandma's house. Back to before." The room was still. The hum of the smart appliances faded behind the weight of the moment. Elon leaned forward slightly, struggling to piece the words together in his mind. "Dreams can feel really real," he said. "Our brains can create entire worlds when we sleep. It's all neurons firing, processing what we saw during the day." X tilted his head. "Then why do I remember it better than yesterday?" Elon had no answer. He picked up the drawing and stared at it again. The golden roots, the rising river, the faceless man with a flame in his chest. "And you?" X nodded. "Not with a mouth. Here." He placed a small hand over his chest. He asked what I wanted to bring back. "What did you say?" Elon asked quietly. "I said I didn't know." The paper trembled slightly in Elon's fingers. Grimes leaned against the doorway, silent. She had been listening for several minutes now, but said nothing. Her expression was unreadable, curious, maybe even moved. "I didn't bring anything back yet," X added softly. Then he returned to his drawing, unconcerned. And Elon's logical mind, the one that could explain rocket propulsion and advanced AI, couldn't explain why those words haunted him. Elon found himself pacing restlessly in his office, unable to focus on the endless meetings filling his schedule. He'd canceled more appointments this week than in the entire previous year, each one feeling suddenly insignificant. On his desk were X's drawings, spirals and golden roots reaching upward, rivers flowing impossibly into the sky. He picked one up, tracing the strange, childlike lines with a trembling finger. This wasn't imagination. There was clarity here, a kind of truth that Elon had spent his life dismissing. He reached into a drawer, pulling out an old leather-bound journal, untouched for decades. He flipped through yellowed pages until he found something he'd forgotten entirely. A prayer from when he was 10. He read the scribbled handwriting of a child, trying desperately to understand pain. "Dear God, if you're real, make it stop hurting. I'll believe in you forever." Elon stared at those words, his heart tightening painfully. How had he forgotten that boy, desperate for answers beyond science, the same boy who built empires to outrun fear? As he sat frozen in the quiet hum of his study, he heard footsteps, soft, familiar, cautious. He looked up to see X standing quietly by the doorway, clutching his stuffed owl. Without speaking, the boy moved closer, placing a hand on his father's chest with solemnity far beyond his years. "He's still watching," X whispered softly, looking up at Elon with eyes both innocent and ancient. Elon swallowed, fighting the urge to dismiss what couldn't be rationalized. "Who's watching, X?" Elon asked carefully, almost afraid of the answer. "The shiny man," X replied calmly. "But not with eyes. He feels us, Daddy, right here." X gently tapped his chest, his expression quietly serious. The air between them thickened, Elon's breath catching in his throat. "How do you know?" Elon asked, voice shaking slightly. "I just do," X said simply. His certainty was unnerving, piercing straight through the layers of logic Elon had spent a lifetime building around himself. Later that night, Elon found himself standing alone on his balcony beneath a vast, unending sky. He felt unusually vulnerable, his defenses stripped away by a child's quiet insistence. As he stared upward, the weight of his life's work pressed heavily upon him, not the accomplishments or the innovation, but the hidden motivations beneath them. Had he built all of this just to avoid remembering something painful? He shivered, not from the cool air, but from the unsettling clarity of the realization. He'd always dismissed the spiritual, branding it as superstition, a crutch. But now, he wondered, had he simply replaced one form of belief with another, less obvious but equally desperate? Elon's fingers gripped the railing tightly. A quiet voice echoed in his mind, his son's words, "Maybe heaven isn't after death, it's after fear." The thought sank deep into Elon, unsettling and profound. He'd spent his entire life running from memories, from vulnerability, from anything he couldn't quantify. But now, standing in the silence, facing the stars he'd long treated as destinations rather than mysteries, something inside began to fracture. It wasn't a collapse. It felt more like an opening, a reluctant surrender to questions he'd spent decades ignoring. And in that moment, Elon knew his life wasn't changing because of rockets or technology, but because of a truth whispered by a child who hadn't yet learned to fear mystery. Elon sat quietly beside X on the edge of his son's small bed. Evening shadows softened the corners of the room, making it feel somehow safer, gentler. The drawings from earlier lay scattered on the floor, vivid images of golden rivers and towering beings made of radiant light. Elon found himself drawn again and again to those simple yet profound illustrations, as if searching them for answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask. X looked up at him, his eyes wide but calm, carrying an innocence that seemed strangely timeless. "Dad," X said softly. The glowing man said something else. Elon leaned in slightly, almost afraid to hear what might follow. What did he say? His voice was barely above a whisper, caught in his throat. X took a gentle breath. "He said you were afraid of forgetting." The words settled between them like a delicate weight, and Elon felt his chest tighten. It was a truth he had hidden even from himself, buried beneath rockets, innovation, endless ambition. Always running forward, never looking back. Yet now, from his child's lips, came a revelation he could neither deny nor explain away. Elon's gaze drifted to the floor, his voice trembling quietly. "I've spent my entire life trying not to remember," he admitted. Memories flickered uninvited behind his eyes. Childhood moments marked by isolation, feelings of being different, the subtle sting of loneliness masked by a relentless drive to succeed. He had built empires precisely so he wouldn't have to face the emptiness he carried. The silence stretched, gentle but profound, as X reached out his small hand and placed it softly over his father's. Elon felt something break open inside him. a quiet cracking of armor he'd unknowingly worn for decades. In the days that followed, Elon sought out someone he hadn't spoken to in years, a neuroscientist named Eleanor Shaw. She had transitioned from studying the physical workings of the mind to exploring the spiritual dimensions children sometimes revealed through near-death experiences or dreams. Years earlier, he would have dismissed her research as wishful thinking. Now, it felt urgently necessary. When Eleanor arrived at his home, Elon carefully laid out X's drawings across the table, each one resonating with a mysterious yet familiar symbolism. Eleanor studied them thoughtfully, her expression unreadable. Eventually, she raised her eyes to Elon. "I've seen this many times before," she said gently. Children across cultures describe something similar, a place of pure light, music you feel rather than hear, and a presence that always asks the same question. Elon's throat tightened. "What question?" Eleanor's voice softened, her gaze steady and wise. "What will you carry back?" The simplicity and depth of her words undid something in Elon. He felt an unexpected heat rise behind his eyes, the threat of tears startling him. He turned away slightly, embarrassed but unable to suppress the emotion that surged through him. "My son asked the same question," he whispered, almost to himself. Later, alone in his private study, Elon sat at his desk, the drawings scattered around him like fragments of a sacred text he could barely understand. He finally allowed himself to weep quietly, shoulders trembling, as decades of carefully contained grief and longing spilled forth. He wept for the child he had once been, for the memories he'd tried to bury beneath the weight of the future. X's words echoed gently but insistently in his heart. "Your father is afraid of forgetting." Elon breathed slowly, understanding now that memory was not weakness but connection, an invitation back to himself, to the deeper truths he had always fled. He had spent a lifetime chasing tomorrow. Now he realized he was being asked to embrace something infinitely larger. Elon had always carried the future. Now he was asked to carry the eternal. Elon drifted into sleep, his dreams vivid yet serene. Around him stretched a city crafted from light and memory, structures glowing softly with a golden warmth that held whispers of forgotten stories. Streets shimmered gently beneath his feet, winding paths paved not in stone, but in quiet moments of kindness and hope. As Elon moved forward, he noticed children walking purposefully, their eyes filled with stars, unafraid of where they were going. He paused, suddenly aware of a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw a being whose form shifted subtly between brilliance and shadow, face obscured yet somehow deeply familiar. This being didn't speak aloud, but Elon felt the words resonate clearly within him. "You've carried the future long enough. Now carry the eternal." Elon awoke, heart pounding softly, not with fear, but with recognition. He sat up, breathing quietly, trying to hold on to the fading edges of the dream. Morning sunlight filtered softly into the room, wrapping him in warmth and reassurance. Moments later, he found X at the breakfast table, calmly eating cereal, already awake as if expecting him. Elon sat down gently beside him, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "X, I think I saw what you saw." X looked up calmly, meeting his father's gaze with gentle seriousness. "I asked him to let you." Elon felt his chest tighten, moved by his son's pure simplicity and quiet faith. He didn't question it, didn't try to analyze or rationalize. Instead, he just accepted it, feeling a subtle shift begin within him. Something more profound than any rocket launch or technological breakthrough. Later that day, Elon drove silently to a quiet hospice nestled between green hills and softly swaying trees. The building sat peacefully, detached from the clamor and chaos of the outside world, a haven of quiet dignity. Inside, he found the room he was looking for. A small boy named Jeremiah lay resting quietly, eyes closed, breathing shallowly. Elon moved softly, carefully approaching the bedside. Reaching into his jacket, he gently unfolded one of X's drawings, the one depicting children walking toward light, surrounded by stars. On the back, he'd carefully written a note. "I don't know what heaven looks like, but my son says it feels like love that hugs you without touching." He placed the drawing tenderly on the nightstand beside the child, whispering softly, almost to himself, "Maybe this will help you remember it when you get there." As Elon stepped back, something within him shifted profoundly. For once, he wasn't strategizing, planning, or innovating. For the first time in his life, Elon wasn't giving, he was returning. Returning something intangible, something eternal. Driving home later, the quiet hum of the car and the fading sunset surrounding him, Elon felt peace settle over him. This wasn't the peace of accomplishment or victory. It was deeper, more authentic, something he had unknowingly sought his entire life. He understood now that the eternal wasn't something to be conquered or even fully understood. It was simply something to be carried. For the first time, Elon wasn't giving, he was returning. In the quiet days that followed, Elon began funding small, nameless chapels in hospices, shelters near children's hospitals, and anonymous care units. There were no logos, no press releases, just quiet, humble spaces dedicated to people who might otherwise be forgotten. It was an act not of building, but of remembering. One morning, as Elon sat silently at the breakfast table, X approached with a drawing. It showed a simple door floating in an endless blue sky. X handed it over, carefully, saying softly, "It's for you." Elon studied the image, turning it over gently. On the back there was only one word, carefully written in his son's small hand, "Remember." Elon felt something stir deep within him, a subtle, profound shift. It wasn't an answer, but an invitation, an opening to something deeper than any rocket, more meaningful than any planet he'd aimed for. He began quietly reshaping his vision, no longer obsessed with Mars, but deeply curious about what it meant to truly land right here, fully present, fully alive. Later that evening, Elon tucked X into bed, kneeling quietly beside him. He whispered softly, "Thank you for showing me." X smiled sleepily, shaking his head slightly. "I didn't show you," he murmured. "I just asked him to." In the gentle silence of his son's room, Elon felt an inner stillness, a profound sense of gratitude and humility. The chase had ended. Not because he'd stopped searching, but because he'd finally understood. The answers weren't out among distant stars. They lived quietly in the spaces between breaths, in moments shared with those he loved most. Elon no longer chased heaven in the stars, but let it rise within him. One quiet evening, Elon found a final drawing left by X on his desk. The image was striking, a cracked earth delicately balanced between two powerful hands, one aflame, the other cloaked in shadow. Above this fragile scene hovered Elon's own face, eyes filled with starlight, serene yet searching. When Elon asked about its meaning, X simply replied, "You were learning how to love." These words stayed with Elon, echoing softly as he quietly revisited hospice homes, walking hallways not as a billionaire or an innovator, but as a silent witness, offering nothing more complicated than presence. It became his quiet ritual, stepping gently into spaces forgotten by the world, reminding himself of what it felt like to simply be human. He established a foundation, nameless and faceless, driven by a single, powerful criterion: the recipient must have been forgotten. No logos, no branding, only quiet support to those who most needed to be seen. At night, alone under the endless stretch of stars, Elon whispered into the silence, not praying for answers or begging for proof, but softly thanking the vast mystery he'd learned to embrace. He had always sought clarity, certainty, and control, but now he welcomed the quiet uncertainty, finding solace in what he couldn't explain. As Elon watched X sleeping peacefully, He remembered the gentle truth his son had awakened within him. The world might always demand proof, but sometimes all that truly mattered was a single child's question. A whisper capable of changing everything. What will you bring back? Subscribe for more inspiring stories of love, faith, and the moments that change everything.